Hi everybody and welcome back to Shakespeare Sundays. I'm Miss Douglas and today we're going to be reading William Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, which has been rewritten by Andrew Matthews and Tony Ross. The great things about these books, which is where I'm getting, obviously I've read the full stories, but where I'm getting a lot of my information from, it's got our cast list and our setting in the front. So the main characters that you'll be listening to in here are Baptista, who's a very rich gentleman in Padua, and his daughters Katharina, who's the Shrew, Baptista's daughter, and Bianca, who plays the younger sister of Katharina. We've got Petruchio, who's a gentleman from Verona. Lucentio is a young gentleman from Pisa. Tranio is Lucentio's servant and friend, and then we've also got Hortensio and Gremio, who, again, funny names because it's actually set in Padua, northern Italy, near Venice in the 16th century. So as I was saying, Hortensio and Gremio are suitors to Bianca who would like to woo her. I am using my very obvious Australian accent, so instead of using Petruchio, it's Petruchio, and instead of Tranio, it's Tranio. So I will try my best not to butcher these names too much, but Australian, Italian names. So our overview of what we're reading today is, it's an interesting story because it uses a lot of 16th century ideas and knowledge which don't quite transfer across to the modern 21st century. However, Katharina, who we follow, she's the Shrew. She's got a bad temper, a sharp tongue, nothing good in the 16th century. No one likes her a lot at all. No one wants to marry her because she's not particularly nice to get along with, so everyone instead wants to marry her younger sister, who's much sweeter and nicer and all that. But Baptista, their father, his rule is no one can marry Bianca until Katharina is married, which of course sets everyone off going, well, if we just find someone for Katharina, then it'll all be fine, it'll all be good, because then everyone can, you know, woo and court Bianca. So Baptista decides to hire a tutor and a school teacher for Bianca, so while she's waiting to get married she can become a fine, educated young woman, which was common in the 16th century. Of higher classes, you were educated, lower classes, it didn't matter. So in all the scheming and trickery, Lucentio pretends to be the teacher, and his servant Tranio pretends to be Lucentio to woo Bianca. We're getting a lot of very similar vibes from last week when we looked at Twelfth Night, where there was a lot of trickery and deception going on. And so while Bianca's being tricked, then Petruchio just marries Katharina. It makes a little bit more sense in the modern adaptations. I'm still trying to get my head around this adaptation. But yes, Petruchio marries Catherine and annoys her. You know, the sun is the moon, this open window is shut, and all these really silly things which really actually irritates her to the point where she just gives up and just, okay, what you say goes. And it's, yeah, it gets pretty messy, and really at the very end of it, the party is shown how Petruchio tames the Shrew by ordering Catherine to get Bianca and another woman, and then she tells them how important it is to obey their husbands. Yes. This is a reading of The Taming of the Shrew. Baptista Minola was rich and respectable, but his two daughters were the talk of Padua. The younger, Bianca, was pretty, polite and modest. Her elder sister, Catherine, was equally pretty, but her character was completely different. Gossips called her the Shrew, a nickname given to any woman with a quick temper and a sharp tongue. As a result, no suitor had asked Baptista's permission to marry Catherine. Bianca, on the other hand, had two suitors, the elderly but wealthy Gremio, and young Hortensio. Catherine was jealous of Bianca, and her jealousy made her bad temper worse than ever. One afternoon, two young men who were sightseeing in Padua happened to pass Baptista's house. One was dressed in colourful clothes. His name was Lucentio, the only son of the prosperous Pisan merchant Vincentio. Lucentio had arrived in Padua that morning and planned to study at the university. The other young man was plainly dressed. He was Tranio, Lucentio's servant and close friend. Both men were surprised when a door flew open and Baptista burst into the street, followed by Gremio, Hortensio, Katharina, and Bianca. Baptista looked flustered. "You can't make me change my mind," he said to Gremio and Hortensio. "Bianca won't marry until Katharina has a husband. I don't suppose either of you would consider marrying her." "She's too fiery for me," spluttered Gremio. "Do you fancy taking her on, Hortensio?" "I would rather wrestle a devil," Hortensio replied. Katharina placed her hands on her hips and glared at her father. "Are you going to let them insult me?" she shrieked. "I hope you're satisfied, Katharina," wailed Bianca. "Father is going to shut me away. I'll probably never marry, and it's all your fault." This outburst was too much for Baptista. "Enough," he thundered. "Katharina, Bianca, go inside." Bianca burst into tears and fled indoors. Katharina sniffed defiantly and followed her. "You see the problem, gentlemen," said Baptista. "If Bianca marries before her sister, Katharina will make my life a misery." "Are you really going to shut Bianca away, Baptista?" inquired Hortensio. "I am," said Baptista. "I must hire a schoolmaster and a music teacher to educate her. If either of you hear of someone suitable, please let me know." Baptista returned to his house, shaking his head and muttering to himself. Hortensio and Gremio exchanged cold glances. Then Hortensio sighed. "We have been rivals for Bianca's love," he said. "But perhaps we should join forces and find a husband for Katharina. Once she's married off, Bianca will be free to choose between us." "That's a good idea," agreed Gremio. "But what kind of fool would want to marry a shrew?" The two suitors walked off together, deep in thought. Tranio laughed aloud at the scene he had just witnessed. "I had no idea that Padua was so lively," he giggled. "Did you notice the expression on the older sister's face?" Lucentio appeared dazed. "I could only see Bianca," he gushed. "Her sweet beauty, her rosy lips. I must woo her." "How?" asked Tranio. "You heard her father. He won't let any suitors near Bianca until her sister is married." "I've got it, Tranio," cried Lucentio. "We're strangers here. Let's change clothes and places. You can pretend to be me and ask permission to be Bianca's suitor. Agree to anything, but make sure Baptista doesn't promise her to anyone else. I'll pretend to be a scholar. Take the job as Bianca's teacher and we'll get to know each other." "And then what?" said Tranio. Lucentio grinned. "And then love will find a way," he said. Hortensio returned home and found an old friend waiting at his front door. "Petruchio!" claimed Hortensio. "What brings you here from Verona?" "I'm looking for a healthy wife." Hortensio returned home and found an old friend waiting at his front door. "Petruchio!" claimed Hortensio. "What brings you here from Verona?" "I'm looking for a wealthy wife," Petruchio revealed. "I don't care what she is like, as long as she is rich." Hortensio wasted no time. He told Petruchio about Katharina and Bianca. Said Petruchio, with a gleam of interest in his eyes. "I know Baptista's well. He's a friend of my father's, but I've never met his daughters. What is Katharina like?" Hortensio pulled a face. "I won't lie to you. She's the worst shrew in Padua," he confessed. "It will take more than harsh words to put me off," Petruchio said. "I must see her at once." "Can I beg a favour of you?" pleaded Hortensio. "If I put on shabby clothes, will you recommend me as a music master to teach Baptista's daughters? Then I can woo Bianca in secret while you woo Katharina." Petruchio was about to agree when Gremio appeared with Lucentio, who was carrying Tranio's clothes and carrying a pile of books. "I found a scholar to tutor Bianca," announced Gremio. "More importantly, my friend Petruchio here is willing to woo Caterina and marry her, if her father gives her a large enough dowry," Hortensio said. "Are you certain you want to woo Caterina?" Gremio asked. Petruchio. "She's a wildcat." Petruchio thumped his chest. "I've faced roaring lions, raging seas, and booming cannon," he bragged. "I'm not afraid of Caterina the Shrew." "Excuse me," said a voice. "Does anyone know where Bianca Minola lives?" Everyone turned and saw Tranio dressed in Lucentio's finery. Lucentio winked slyly at his friend. "Who are you, and what is your business with Bianca?" demanded Hortensio. "I am Lucentio, and I wish to woo her," Tranio lied smoothly. Gremio turned red with rage. "Bianca is my chosen love," he cried. "Mine too," added Hortensio. "Gentlemen," Petruchio said grandly, "you seem to forget that Bianca won't marry anyone unless I marry Caterina. Your future happiness is in my hands." Not long afterwards, Baptista received Gremio, Petruchio, Tranio, who was passed off as Lucentio, and the two so-called scholars. After introductions had been made, Baptista sent the tutors away to begin teaching his daughters. Then Petruchio spoke boldly. "You know my father, Baptista, so you know the kind of fellow I am. If I marry your daughter Caterina, what will her dowry be?" 20,000 crowns and half my lands when I die," Baptista replied. "Excellent," said Petruchio. "The matter is settled." Baptista smiled ruefully. "Getting Caterina to agree to the marriage might be more difficult than you think," he warned. "I'll be more than a match for her," Petruchio assured him. "I am the breeze that will cool her hot temper." "Can I discuss Bianca's future with you now, Baptista?" ventured Gremio. "And I," broke in Tranio. "I am a newcomer to Padua, but I have heard of Bianca's grace and beauty. I ask your permission to woo her, once Caterina is married." Before Baptista could answer, Hortensio staggered in, with his head sticking out of a broken lute. "What happened to you?" gasped Baptista. "Caterina," Hortensio groaned. "When I told her she was playing badly, she called me a twangling jack and smashed this lute over my head." He wandered off unsteadily. "She's a lively one," chuckled Petruchio. "I'm longing to meet her." "I'll send her to you," said Baptista. "These two gentlemen and I have things to talk over." He led Gremio and Tranio away into his study. Once he was alone, Petruchio paced up and down. "I must confuse her with my wooing," he told himself. "Whatever she says, I'll say the opposite, until she's so mixed up, she won't even notice I've married her." Caterina appeared, and for a moment Petruchio was dumbstruck by her beauty, but he quickly recovered. "Good day, Kate," he said. Caterina scowled. "No one calls me Kate," she snapped. "I'm going to," insisted Petruchio. "You are the prettiest Kate in the world. I shall marry you and make you my Kate." "Are you a madman who has wandered in off the street?" Caterina fumed. "No, I'm a gentleman of Verona," declared Petruchio. "We'll soon see if you're a gentleman," snarled Caterina, and she slapped Petruchio's face. Petruchio grabbed her by the wrist and spoke softly to her while she struggled to escape. "I was told you had a bad temper, but you're as sweet as springtime flowers," he cooed. Caterina broke free. "You are mad," she panted. Baptista stepped out of his study. "How are you two lovebirds?" he asked. "Do you really want me to marry this lunatic?" screeched Caterina. "What sort of a father are you?" "People are wrong to call your daughter a shrew, Baptista," Petruchio said. "They don't know the real Kate the way I do. We've agreed to be married next Sunday." "We haven't agreed to anything," yelped Caterina. "I must go to Venice for my wedding outfit," Petruchio said. "Until Sunday, Kate." He blew her a kiss and left. Caterina stormed off in the opposite direction. Baptista returned to his study, where Gremio and Tranio were waiting. "Bianca's happiness and comfort concerns me most," he said to them. "For that reason, if you can prove your father is as wealthy as you claim, Lucentio, Bianca will be your wife." Tranio bowed. "Thank you, sir," he said. On the following Sunday, Petruchio continued with his scheme to cure Katharina of her shrewishness by behaving more outrageously than she ever had. He arrived late at the church, riding a scrawny old horse, and wearing a hat with a ridiculously long feather attached. His jerkin was patched, his breeches were threadbare. One boot was black, the other was brown, and his sword was bent and rusty. During the ceremony, Petruchio bawled out his vows. The priest was so startled that he dropped his book, and when he stooped to pick it up, Petruchio boxed his ears before insisting on a goblet of wine, which he spilled over the priest's cassock. Finally, he kissed his new wife with a smacking sound that echoed throughout the church. The moment the ceremony was over, Petruchio insisted that he and Katharina should journey to his house in Verona. By the time they got there, Katharina was tired and hungry, but when Petruchio's servants brought food, he said that she could not eat it because it was burnt. When they went to bed, he rearranged all the sheets and pillows, and was continually getting up to open and close the windows, first saying it was too cold for Katharina, and then it was too stuffy. In the end, Katharina was too weary to complain. The next morning, in the garden of Baptista's house, Tranio and Hortensio hid behind a shrub, and spied on Lucentio and Bianca, who were seated side by side on a bench. "Look at how they're holding hands," whispered Hortensio. "See the way they're gazing into each other's eyes. They're madly in love. Fancy Bianca falling for a penniless scholar." "She hasn't," Tranio confessed. "He is Lucentio. I'm his servant Tranio. We swapped places so that he could woo Bianca." "And he has won her," sighed Hortensio. "Oh well, actually I've been pretending too. I'm not a music master, but Hortensio, a gentleman of Padua. Since Bianca has given her heart to another, I'll be off. I know a pretty young widow who would marry me in the twinkle of an eye if I asked her." Hortensio was proved right, and within a few days he married the widow, and Bianca married Lucentio. The real Lucentio. A week later, Petruchio and Katharina visited Padua to attend the party that Baptista threw to celebrate his daughter's marriages. Though Katharina seemed less stubborn than she had been, Petruchio decided to annoy her to test how well she could keep her temper. When they were almost at Baptista's house, he waved at the sky. "How brightly the moon shines," he cried. "The moon," said Katharina, frowning. "That's the sun." "Well, I say it's the moon," Petruchio declared. "And I know it's the sun," retorted Katharina. "So you're still insisting on contradicting me, eh?" Petruchio said. "Then let's go back to Verona. We can't stay at your father's house if we're going to bicker all the time." Katharina hung her head. She was weary, hungry, thirsty, and had been looking forward to being reunited with her family. "All right, Petruchio," she said meekly. "If you say it's the moon, then so it is." "Ha! But I say it's the sun," announced Petruchio. "It can be a candle if you like," groaned Katharina. "I don't want to argue any more." Petruchio beamed. "You have no idea how sweet those words sound," he said. As well as Bianca, Lucentio, Petruchio and Katharina, Hortensio and his bride were among the guests at the party. Towards the end of the evening, the three new husbands sat drinking together. Wine loosened their tongues and their wits, and they had a disagreement over whose wife was the most obedient. "Let's settle the matter by each sending a servant to ask our wives to meet us here. The first wife to turn up will be the most obedient." "Care to bet 20 crowns on the outcome?" asked Lucentio. "My Katharina is worth more than a bet of 20 crowns, Petruchio protested. 100 then, suggested Lucentio. "Done," agreed Petruchio. "You go first." Lucentio beckoned to a servant. "Tell your mistress I want to see her right away," he said. The servant promptly left the room and soon returned. "My mistress says she is too busy to come to you now, sir," he told Lucentio. Petruchio and Hortensio sniggered at Lucentio's blush. "Go and ask my wife to come to me," Hortensio instructed the servant. Once again the servant left, and once again he returned alone. "Your wife says she's in no mood for jokes, sir," he informed Hortensio. "If you wish to see her, you must go to her." It was Hortensio's turn to blush. "Tell Mistress Katharina I wish to see her," Petruchio said to the servant. For the third time the servant left, and before long Katharina appeared. "You sent for me, husband," she said. "Yes," replied Petruchio. "Find Bianca and Hortensio's wife, and fetch them here." Catherine did as she was told, and within a minute all three wives stood before their husbands. "Now, Kate," Petruchio said, "tell these two headstrong women what you have learned about husbands and wives." "Our husbands keep us warm and safe, and work hard to feed and clothe us," began Catherine. "So we should love, honour and obey them, not scold them. We are softer and weaker than men, and it's foolish to squabble with them. Husbands and wives should take delight in one another." Petruchio laughed and held out his hand to Catherine. "No one will ever call you a shrew again," he promised. "Come here and kiss me, Kate." So obviously the themes in this book, similar to last week, a lot of trickery and deception and pretending to be other people. This one's about a lot of love and marriage. So in Shakespearean times, a wife was to be quiet and obedient, and what the husband said goes, which is why throughout this book or play, whilst it's irritating to our modern day thinking, the fact that Katharina has her own ideas and opinions is not acceptable. So her at the end of the film being like, "My husband knows what is best, listen to him," that is good. The fact that she has learnt. Today, however, obviously people will feel more sympathetic, and I know I'm feeling a little uncomfy with the way that Petruchio was claiming her. "You are my wife, so you must listen, what I say goes," and icky things like that. However, this play is meant to be a comedy, and so the actors would obviously over-exaggerate in their acting, so Petruchio being a macho man and opening and closing windows and silly things like that, just, would be a lot of flourishes and a lot of, "but I'm your husband" kind of a deal. And Katharina and her temper, probably similar, I picture a little bit similar to the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland, where normal and then just flying off the hook, off with her head kind of a deal. And then also we've got Lucentio, who immediately falls in love with Bianca, like that love at first sight, that Romeo and Juliet, like no one, I shouldn't say no one, but what are the odds that someone just looks at someone and goes, "I will marry you," is it plausible? Finally, with our adaptations, one of them is just The Taming of the Shrew by Franco Zeffirelli in 1967 with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, just a very well-known director and actress and actor. The modern adaptation in which I like to view is a 1999 film called 10 Things I Hate About You with Julia Stiles, Heath Ledger and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, where it puts it into, a loose modernisation of The Taming of the Shrew, where Kat Stratford is Katharina, Patrick Verona is Petruchio from Verona. We've got a lot of play on names. Cameron is Lucentio, and easy enough, Bianca is Bianca. Very easy to get that one. And basically what we have is a very desperate new student, Cameron, who falls in love with Bianca, like when she walks past him in the quad, and tries to make her like him by pretending to be her French tutor, which he is horrible at French. And then we have Patrick, who's then paid to go out with Kat, so that Joey Donner, who's a really self-absorbed idiot, can try and go out with Bianca. So then obviously all through the teen drama and romance, spoiler alert, we find ourselves watching the really famous scene where Julia Stiles' Kat Stratford breaks down in class over having her heart like epically shredded after finding out that Patrick's money making with Joey Donna, which that can symbolise the taming of the shrew, because at the beginning of the film she's shown as being stuck up and doesn't show her emotions, and she's all like, oh, the system. And then at the end we see her completely break down in class because she's exposed herself to feelings and emotion, and especially about Patrick too. Always check the ratings of any videos and films that I discuss. I'm pretty sure 10 Things I Hate About You is rated M in Australia, which means 15 years and above. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next Shakespeare Sunday.